I stood frozen in the dim hallway of my father's house, the scent of fresh paint still hanging in the air from his latest renovation. Judge Leonard Rowan had always been particular about appearances. Everything had to look perfect, orderly, controlled. Just like he wanted me to be. "Pack your things, Lila." His voice sliced through the silence like a gavel coming down. "If you won't be a lawyer, you're no longer my daughter." My sketchbook trembled in my hands. I'd spent the entire morning gathering courage to tell him I wasn't going to Harvard Law. That I'd declined the acceptance letter he'd been bragging about to his colleagues for months. That I wanted to go to art school instead. His face had turned red, then purple, then settled into something worse. Cold disappointment. "Dad, please just listen." "There's nothing to listen to." He turned his back to me, straightening a picture frame on the wall. One of him shaking hands with the governor. "You're throwing away your future for finger painting." I looked past him to where Mom stood in the doorway of the kitchen. Her eyes were wet, but she wouldn't meet my gaze. She'd never stood up to him. Not once in 20 years. "Art is my future," I whispered. He laughed. A harsh, bitter sound. "Art doesn't build legacies, Lila. Law does." The cold Oregon rain hit my face the moment I stepped outside. I clutched my portfolio against my chest, trying to shield it from the water. Everything I owned that mattered was in that leather case. Sketches, paintings, charcoal drawings. Years of secret work hidden in my bedroom while I pretended to study legal precedents. Behind me, the front door clicked shut. No slam. Just a quiet, final sound that felt worse than shouting. I turned back once. Mom's silhouette filled the living room window, her hand pressed against the glass. But she didn't open the door. She didn't call my name. She just stood there, trapped between loyalty to him and love for me. I understood then that she'd made her choice years ago. The rain soaked through my jacket as I walked down the tree-lined street where I'd grown up. Every house looked the same. Perfect lawns, perfect paint, perfect lives. I'd always felt like a smudge on a clean window here. My phone buzzed. A text from my best friend Aria. "Did you tell him?" I typed back with shaking fingers, "I'm homeless." 3 dots appeared, then, "Come to my place." Now. I didn't have anywhere else to go. That night, lying on Aria's couch, I couldn't stop replaying his words. "You're no daughter of mine." Like he could erase 18 years with one sentence. Like all those birthday parties and school events and family dinners meant nothing if I didn't follow his script. I'd known he'd be angry. But I hadn't expected him to cut me off completely. No college fund. No support. No family. Aria brought me tea and sat on the floor beside me. "He'll come around," she said softly. "You don't know him." I stared at the ceiling, tracing patterns in the textured paint. He once didn't speak to his own brother for 5 years because he dropped out of medical school. Family legacy is everything to him. Then maybe his legacy isn't worth being part of. I wanted to believe that. But it hurt anyway. Like losing a limb you didn't even realize you needed until it was gone. My phone stayed silent all night. No calls. No texts. Nothing from Mom either. I pulled out my sketchbook and started drawing. A woman walking away from a dark house, rain falling around her like tears. The only way I knew how to process pain was to put it on paper. Art had always been my escape. Now it was all I had left. 2 weeks later, I signed a lease on a basement apartment in downtown Portland. The place smelled like mildew and the ceiling leaked when it rained hard, but the rent was cheap enough that I could afford it with my coffee shop salary. Moonshadow Cafe hired me on the spot when I showed up desperate and dripping wet. The owner, Miss Torres, didn't ask many questions. She just handed me an apron and showed me how to work the espresso machine. I worked double shifts most days. Morning rush from 6 to noon, then back for the evening crowd from 4 to 10. My feet ached constantly. My hands smelled like coffee beans no matter how many times I washed them. At night, I painted on whatever I could find. Cardboard boxes from behind the grocery store. Old canvas I bought at thrift stores. Once, on a broken picture frame someone left by the dumpster. I couldn't afford proper supplies. My brushes were cheap and shed bristles. My paints came in small tubes that ran out too quickly. But I painted anyway, sitting on my apartment floor under a single lamp, creating until my eyes burned with exhaustion. The bills piled up fast. Rent, electricity, food. I started skipping meals to make the money stretch. Lost 15 pounds in the first month. But I didn't call my father. I'd rather starve than prove him right. Rejection emails filled my inbox like a flood. I'd applied to 20 galleries in the Portland area, sending photos of my work with carefully written cover letters explaining my vision and passion. The responses were all variations of the same message: we're not looking for new artists right now. Your style doesn't fit our current collection. Please try again next season. One gallery owner was more blunt: your technical skills need development before we can consider you. I sat in my apartment, reading that last email over and over. Maybe Dad was right. Maybe I was wasting my time. Maybe I should have just gone to law school like he wanted. But then I'd look at my paintings leaning against the wall. A series I'd titled Silent Voices. Women with their mouths covered by hands, flowers, shadows. Each one representing a different way we're taught to disappear. These paintings meant something. They had to. At the cafe, I watched people rush past the windows, everyone moving so fast towards somewhere important. I wondered if any of them had ever disappointed their families. If any of them felt this hollow. Ms. Torres found me crying during my break one afternoon. She didn't say anything, just sat beside me and shared her lunch. Sometimes kindness from strangers hurts more than cruelty from family because it reminds you what you're missing. It started on a Tuesday morning before my shift. The alley behind Moonshadow Cafe had a blank brick wall that caught perfect morning light. I'd walked past it every day for 3 months, always seeing potential in that empty space. That morning, I showed up 2 hours early with the last of my acrylic paints and a vision burning in my mind. I painted a woman's face, half fading into shadow, half emerging into brilliant color. Her eyes were closed on the shadow side, wide open on the colored side. Like she was waking up from a long sleep. My hands moved without conscious thought. This was different from the careful work I did in my apartment. This was raw, urgent, real. I finished just as the sun fully rose, my arms aching and paint splattered across my clothes. When I went inside to start my shift, customers kept pointing out the window. "Did you see the mural?" one woman asked. "It's incredible." By noon, someone had filmed it and posted it online. By evening, the video had 40,000 views. The caption read, "Whoever painted this, you just spoke for all of us." I watched the comments pour in, people sharing their own stories of feeling invisible, of finding their voices, of refusing to disappear. For the first time since Dad disowned me, I felt like maybe I'd made the right choice. The mural became a landmark overnight. People started calling it The Awakening, even though I'd never given it a name. They took selfies in front of it, left flowers and notes at its base, tagged it in thousands of social media posts. Local news stations did segments about the mysterious artist. "Who is the person behind Portland's most talked about street art?" they asked. I stayed quiet, hiding behind my coffee counter and watching the phenomenon unfold. Part of me wanted to claim it, to step forward and say, "I did that." But a bigger part was terrified. What if Dad saw it? What if he had it removed? What if claiming credit meant facing his judgment all over again? I overheard customers debating its meaning. One person thought it represented mental health awareness. Another saw it as political commentary. A philosophy professor came in 3 days in a row just to stare at it through the window. The artist understands something fundamental about human consciousness, she told me while ordering her latte. The liminal space between who we're told to be and who we actually are. I smiled and handed her the coffee, my hand steady even though my heart was racing. She was talking about my work. My vision. My truth painted on a wall. That night, I started planning my next mural. If one piece of art could touch 40,000 people, what could 10 pieces do? What could 100 do? A blogger named Felix found me through Aria, who'd accidentally mentioned her barista friend painted murals. He showed up at Moonshadow during my break, notebook in hand and curiosity bright in his eyes. "I want to interview you," he said. "But I'll keep you anonymous if that's what you need." I hesitated, stirring sugar into my coffee even though I never took sugar. "Why?" "Because your work matters." He pulled out his phone, showing me his blog. 50,000 followers. Articles about local artists, culture, social justice. The city is talking about you. They deserve to know the story, even if they don't know the name. We talked for 2 hours. I told him about painting as survival, about finding voice through art, about refusing to disappear just because someone wanted me erased. I didn't mention my father or Harvard law. Just focused on the work itself. His article went live 3 days later under the headline, "The Street Artist Who Paints Silence into Power." He'd given me an alias, Echo. Echo doesn't want recognition, the article read. She wants resonance. Every mural is a mirror, reflecting the parts of ourselves we've learned to hide. The article was shared 12,000 times in the first week. People started looking for more murals, expecting them. Waiting for them. I felt pressure and possibility in equal measure. Echo had become bigger than me. Now I had to live up to her. My father saw the article at his courthouse. I know because Mom called me for the first time in 4 months, her voice shaking. "He's furious," she whispered. "He thinks it's vandalism. He's talking about having the city remove all street art downtown." "That's not illegal," I said, gripping my phone. "Murals are protected if they're on private property with permission." "Since when do you know about art law?" "Since I became an artist, Mom." Silence stretched between us. Then, "Are you okay? Are you eating enough?" Tears burned my eyes. "I'm fine. Lila. I have to go." I hung up before she could hear me crying. That afternoon, Dad gave a statement to the local paper about maintaining the dignity of our city's aesthetic standards. He didn't mention me, didn't know Echo was his daughter. But I felt every word like a personal attack. This Echo person, he was quoted as saying, is probably another dropout wasting their time instead of contributing to society in meaningful ways. I read those words sitting in my apartment, something cold and hard forming in my chest. He was talking about me without knowing it. Dismissing my work, my passion, my entire existence as worthless. I picked up my paintbrushes. If he wanted to see meaningful contribution, I'd show him what that actually looked like. The gallery owner arrived at Moonshadow on a rainy Thursday afternoon. Her name was Victoria, and she wore the kind of elegant clothes that made my coffee-stained apron feel even more shabby. She'd been sketching during her morning coffee for 3 days straight. I thought she was just another customer until she approached the counter, holding up one of my napkin drawings I'd left by the register. "You're Echo, aren't you?" My heart stopped. "I don't. I've been in the art world for 30 years. I know talent when I see it, and I know style when it repeats." She gestured to the window, to the mural visible in the alley. Same hand. Same vision. Same heart. I should have denied it. But something in her eyes was kind, curious rather than predatory. Please don't tell anyone, I whispered. I won't. She smiled. But I do want to offer you a show. Small space, 3 weeks from now. 20 pieces. I think it's time Echo had a proper introduction. I wanted to say yes immediately. But fear held my tongue. What if people hate it? Then they hate it. But what if they don't? What if this is your moment, and you let it slip away because you're afraid? She left her business card and walked out into the rain. I stared at it for the rest of my shift, turning it over and over in my paint-stained fingers. Victoria Chin Gallery, established 1985. For the first time since leaving home, I wasn't just surviving. Someone was offering me a chance to actually be seen. Mom appeared at the gallery on opening day like a ghost from my past. I'd sent her the invitation on impulse, not really expecting her to show. But there she stood, wearing a long cream coat and holding her purse like a shield. We didn't speak at first. She just walked slowly through the small space, studying each painting. The Silent Voices series hung on the main wall. 12 portraits of women finding their power through pain. She stopped in front of the largest piece. I'd painted it in a fury of emotion one night, working until dawn. A woman walking away from a shadowed house, her spine straight, her face turned toward light even as rain fell around her. I titled it, Leaving Home. Mom stood there for 10 minutes. Other visitors flowed around her, but she didn't move. Just stared at that painting with tears streaming down her face. When she finally turned to me, her voice cracked. You painted my heart too. We hugged in the middle of the gallery, both of us crying. She pressed an envelope into my hands. Inside was the gold bracelet she'd worn every day since her own mother died, and a note in her careful handwriting. He won't understand now, but I do. Don't stop. She left before I could say anything. But it was enough. For the first time, I felt like I hadn't lost both parents. Just the one who refused to see me. The gallery show sold 7 pieces in 2 weeks. Not enough to quit my job, but enough to buy proper supplies and pay rent without skipping meals. Victoria was impressed. She started introducing me to other gallery owners, curators, collectors. But I still painted murals at night, still signed them Echo. The anonymous identity felt like armor. Like I could be brave without being vulnerable. My next mural went up on the wall of a community center in North Portland. A woman made of butterflies, breaking free from a cocoon of hands trying to hold her back. I worked from midnight to dawn, my breath fogging in the cold air. By morning, it was trending online. Echo Strikes Again read the headlines. The mural sparked conversations about control, freedom, becoming. A domestic violence shelter used it in their fundraising campaign. A therapist told me it helped her client find words for feelings she'd buried for years. Art wasn't just about me anymore. It had become something larger, something that mattered to people I'd never meet. I painted another mural on an overpass. Then one on the side of a bookstore. Then one on a bridge support. Each one featured women in motion, refusing to be erased, claiming space in the world. The media called my work Defiant Grace, and the name stuck. Critics wrote essays analyzing my themes. Art students came to study my technique. The city started protecting my murals as cultural landmarks. And through it all, I remained Echo. Unknown. Protected. Free. My father appeared on the evening news to discuss what he called the Echo problem. I was at Aria's apartment, and she turned up the volume when his face filled the screen. While some call it art, he said, adjusting his tie, we must consider whether public spaces should be used for personal expression without proper oversight. These murals, while visually appealing to some, represent a breakdown in civic order. Arya threw a pillow at the TV. He's such a pretentious. Show, I want to hear this. The reporter asked if he'd seen Echo's work in person. Dad's jaw tightened. I've seen photographs. The technique is adequate, but the message is unclear. Art should elevate, not simply provoke. Something sharp twisted in my chest. He was critiquing my work without knowing it was mine. Dismissing it as adequate. Unclear. Not elevated enough for his standards. The same way he dismissed everything I'd ever created, every dream I'd dared to voice, every version of myself that didn't fit his perfect image. I left Arya's apartment and went straight to the courthouse. The one that bore his name, Leonard Rowan Justice Center, engraved in stone above the entrance. The building where he'd built his legacy. The wall facing the parking lot was blank brick. Perfect canvas. I spent the entire night painting a massive heart, cracked down the center but flowering with vines and blooms. Inside the heart, a silhouette of a gavel made of light. I titled it, Justice and Grace. By morning, it was the most photographed spot in Portland. The backlash came swift and fierce. Half the city praised the courthouse mural as powerful commentary on law and compassion. The other half demanded its removal as disrespectful to the justice system. City council meetings became battlegrounds. Protesters gathered with signs reading, "Preserve Echo's art," and "Remove vandalism from public buildings." A petition to protect my murals gathered 100,000 signatures in 3 days. Another petition to remove them gathered 50,000. My father led the opposition, though he didn't know he was fighting against his own daughter. He gave interviews about respecting institutions and maintaining professional spaces. His face grew harder each time I saw him on TV, his disappointment in Echo almost as deep as his disappointment in me. Anonymous threats started appearing in my inbox. Reveal yourself or we'll find you. Stop defacing our city. Talentless hack hiding behind a fake name. I wanted to quit. Delete everything. Disappear back into the safety of anonymity. But then a 15-year-old girl approached me at the cafe. "Are you Echo?" she whispered, eyes wide with hope. I froze. She pulled out her phone, showing me her Instagram. Every post was a photo of my murals. "Your art saved my life," she said. I was in a really dark place. But seeing your work made me feel less alone. Made me think maybe I could be brave too. She left before I could respond, but her words stayed with me. This was bigger than Dad's approval. Bigger than my fear. People needed Echo. And Echo needed to keep going. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A national art magazine called Luminary contacted me through Victoria. They were featuring 20 women artists under 30 who were redefining contemporary art in America. They wanted me for their cover story. But there was a condition: I had to reveal my real name. "The mystique is compelling," the editor explained over the phone, "but our feature is about celebrating artists, not aliases. We need the person behind Echo." I had 1 week to decide. I spent 3 days in turmoil, painting and repainting the same canvas, unable to focus. Revealing myself meant facing Dad's reaction. Meant the whole city knowing that Judge Leonard Rowan's daughter was the street artist he'd been condemning on the news. Arya thought I should do it. You can't hide forever. And honestly, the look on your father's face when he finds out will be priceless. Victoria thought I should wait. You're building something powerful. Don't rush into exposure before you're ready. But Mom's words kept echoing, "He won't understand now, but I do. Don't stop." On the 7th day, I made my decision. The reveal would happen at the magazine's Women in Art exhibition. And the venue they'd chosen, whether by coincidence or cosmic irony, was the Leonard Rowan Justice Center atrium. I would unveil myself in my father's courthouse. In the building bearing his name. Under the shadow of his legacy. It felt terrifying. And absolutely right. The night before the exhibition, I couldn't sleep. I lay in my apartment, staring at the ceiling, imagining every possible disaster. Dad having me arrested. Media ridicule. The art world rejecting me once they knew I was just a 20-year-old barista with no formal training. My phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. Second thoughts are normal. But regret lasts longer than embarrassment. I got up and stood in front of my bathroom mirror. The girl looking back wasn't the same person who'd left her father's house 18 months ago. That girl had been scared, uncertain, desperate for approval. This woman had calloused hands from painting. Confidence in her eyes from creating work that mattered. Scars from surviving rejection but still choosing to be seen. I texted the magazine editor, "I'm ready. My name is Lila Rowan." The press release went out at midnight. By dawn, my phone was exploding with notifications. News sites were already running the story. Echo revealed, judge's daughter behind Portland's most controversial street art. I turned off my phone and went to set up the exhibition. Whatever was coming, I'd face it standing in front of my art. Claiming my voice. Refusing to disappear. The woman in the mirror smiled back at me. Scared, but ready. The atrium of the Leonard Rowan Justice Center had been transformed. My paintings hung on temporary walls, lit by professional spotlights that made the colors glow. 20 pieces total, including several new works I'd created specifically for this show. The centerpiece was a massive canvas titled Legacy. It showed two figures, a man in judicial robes and a woman holding a paintbrush, standing back to back, their shadows intertwining even as they faced different directions. Media crews set up cameras. Gallery owners clustered in groups, whispering. The guest list included city council members, art critics, collectors, and about 200 general admission attendees who'd won spots through a lottery. My father wasn't on the guest list. But I knew he'd find out. The exhibition was in his courthouse. His name was literally carved above the door. Victoria found me hiding behind a column. Breathe. You've earned this. Every bit of it. What if he comes? Then he comes. And he sees his daughter being celebrated for exactly what he told her was worthless. Either way, you win. The doors opened. People flooded in, their voices echoing off the marble floors. I watched from my hiding spot as they moved from painting to painting, reading the descriptions, discussing the techniques and meanings. A reporter spotted me. Then another. Within minutes, I was surrounded by cameras and microphones, questions firing like bullets. How does it feel to reveal yourself? What message do you have for young artists? Does your father know you're here? I opened my mouth to answer. And that's when I saw him. Standing in the entrance, frozen, staring at my name printed in bold letters across the exhibition banner, Lila Rowan, Defiant Grace. Our eyes met across the crowded atrium. For a moment, the world went silent. Dad stood motionless in the doorway while reporters turned their cameras toward him, sensing drama. His face cycled through shock, recognition, and something that might have been pain. I walked toward him slowly, my heart hammering. The crowd parted, everyone watching this collision of father and daughter, judge and artist, legacy and defiance. Hello, Dad. He looked at the paintings around us, then back at me. You're Echo. I'm Echo. All this time. His voice was rough. The murals I've been trying to remove. The work I called adequate. It was yours. Yes. He stood there, suit perfectly pressed, tie perfectly straight, everything about him controlled except the confusion in his eyes. Why didn't you tell me? Would you have listened? The question hung between us. You disowned me for choosing art. You called it finger painting and wasting time. Why would I think you'd suddenly understand? I thought you'd fail, he said quietly. I thought you'd come crawling back, begging for help. I was waiting for you to realize I was right. Around us, the crowd pretended not to listen while hanging on every word. Cameras recorded everything. This private moment was becoming public spectacle. But you didn't fail. He looked at the paintings again, really seeing them now. You created something significant. Something adequate. I couldn't keep the bitterness from my voice. He flinched. I saw these paintings without knowing they were yours. I saw them as art, not as my daughter's rebellion. And they were. He paused, struggling. They were extraordinary. The confrontation was cut short by Victoria pulling me away for the formal program. Dad disappeared into the crowd while I took my place at the podium, facing hundreds of people who'd come to see Echo finally revealed. My speech was short. I talked about finding voice through art, about painting as survival, about refusing to disappear just because someone couldn't see you. I didn't mention my father directly, but everyone in that atrium knew the subtext. For everyone who's been told their dreams don't matter, I concluded, for everyone who's been dismissed or erased or called inadequate, this exhibition is proof that they were wrong. You are not too much. You are not too little. You are exactly enough. The standing ovation was thunderous. People were crying. The 15-year-old girl from the cafe was in the front row, holding a sign that said, "Echo saved my life." After the speeches, collectors approached Victoria about purchasing pieces. Museum curators discussed touring exhibitions. A publisher wanted to do a book about my work. Suddenly, Echo wasn't just a street artist. I was becoming a legitimate name in the art world. Through it all, I kept catching glimpses of Dad. He stood in the back, watching but not approaching. His expression was unreadable. Mom appeared beside me during a quiet moment. He's overwhelmed, she whispered. Give him time. I gave him 18 months. I know. But maybe. She gestured to the paintings. Maybe he's finally seeing what I always saw. The internet exploded overnight. #Echo Revealed trended nationally. News outlets ran stories about the judge's daughter who chose art over law. Social media was equally divided between people praising my courage and people calling it a publicity stunt. The Portland Chronicle ran a front-page story, "Local artist Lila Rowan's identity reveal sparks family drama and art world buzz." By morning, I'd received 3 book offers, 5 exhibition invitations, and 2 movie production companies wanting to option my story. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing. But the message that mattered came at 3 a.m. A text from an unknown number. "Can we talk?" Dad. I stared at those 3 words for 20 minutes. Part of me wanted to delete it, block the number, maintain the boundary I'd built. But another part, the part that still remembered being 8 years old and proud of my first painting, wanted to hear what he had to say. I texted back, "Coffee. Tuesday. 10 a.m. Moonshadow Cafe." His response came immediately, "I'll be there." The next 2 days crawled by. I worked my shifts at the cafe, prepared for upcoming exhibitions, and tried not to obsess over what Dad might say. Victoria warned me not to expect too much. "Pride is hard to swallow," she said. "Especially for men like your father who've built their entire identity on being right." I'm not hoping for an apology. I just want him to understand why I had to choose this. The internet exploded overnight. Hashtag Echo Revealed trended nationally. News outlets ran stories about the judge's daughter who chose art over law. Social media was equally divided between people praising my courage and people calling it a publicity stunt. The Portland Chronicle ran a front-page story, "Local artist Lila Rowan's identity reveal sparks family drama and art world buzz." By morning, I'd received 3 book offers, 5 exhibition invitations, and 2 movie production companies wanting to option my story. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing. But the message that mattered came at 3 a.m. A text from an unknown number. "Can we talk?" Dad. I stared at those 3 words for 20 minutes. Part of me wanted to delete it, block the number, maintain the boundary I'd built. But another part, the part that still remembered being 8 years old and proud of my first painting, wanted to hear what he had to say. I texted back, "Coffee. Tuesday. 10 a.m. Moonshadow Cafe." His response came immediately, "I'll be there." The next 2 days crawled by. I worked my shifts at the cafe, prepared for upcoming exhibitions, and tried not to obsess over what Dad might say. Victoria warned me not to expect too much. "Pride is hard to swallow," she said. "Especially for men like your father who've built their entire identity on being right." I'm not hoping for an apology. I just want him to understand why I had to choose this. Understanding is harder than apology. Apology is just words. Understanding requires actually seeing you. Dad arrived exactly on time, wearing a suit even though it was his day off. Old habits. He looked smaller somehow, less imposing than the figure who'd haunted my memories. I made his coffee myself. Black, 2 sugars, the way he'd always taken it. Some things you don't forget, even when you're trying to. We sat at a corner table, the cafe quiet on a Tuesday morning. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Just 2 people who used to be family, trying to remember how to talk to each other. "Your mother showed me your childhood sketchbooks," he said finally. "The ones you hid in your closet. She's been keeping them all this time." I hadn't known that. Why? She knew. Even back then, she knew you were meant for this. He stirred his coffee, not looking at me. "I saw those drawings, Lila. The talent was always there. I just chose not to see it." Why? The question I'd been carrying for 18 months. He was quiet for a long time. Because I was scared. My father pushed me toward law, and his father before him. I thought that's what legacy meant, continuing what came before. But you wanted something different, and I didn't know how to handle that. It felt like rejection. Of you. Or of your choices. Both, maybe. He finally met my eyes. I thought if you followed a different path, it meant my path was wrong. That everything I'd built was meaningless if my own daughter didn't want it. I set down my mug. "Your legacy isn't meaningless, Dad. It's just not mine. I know that now." Dad reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded newspaper. The Portland Chronicle from yesterday, featuring my exhibition on the front page. The photo showed me standing in front of a legacy, the painting of the judge and the artist with intertwining shadows. "I kept staring at this painting," he said. "Trying to understand what you were saying. And I realized, we're not opposites. We're both trying to make the world better. Just in different ways." Tears burned my eyes. I wasn't trying to rebel against you. I was trying to survive. I know. And I made that survival harder than it needed to be. His voice cracked. "I'm proud of you, Lila. I'm sorry I couldn't say that 18 months ago. I'm sorry I couldn't see what was right in front of me. The apology I'd stopped hoping for. The acknowledgement I'd needed. It sat between us like a bridge slowly being built. I can't erase the past 18 months, he continued. I can't give you back the time I wasted being stubborn and blind. But I want to try moving forward. If you'll let me. I thought about all the nights I'd cried myself to sleep, feeling worthless and abandoned. All the times I'd questioned my choice, wondered if he'd been right. All the pain that had led to art that mattered. I need time, I said. To trust this. To trust you. I understand. But I'd like to try too. He smiled, and for the first time in my life, I saw him actually see me. Not as a disappointing daughter or a failed legacy. Just as Lila. An artist. A person with her own path. Exactly as I was meant to be. The solo exhibition, Defiant Grace, the complete works of Lila Rowan, opened 6 weeks later at a major gallery downtown. Victoria had pulled strings to secure the space, and collectors were already placing bids before opening night. The invitation list included everyone who'd supported me through the hard months. Aria, Miss Torres, Felix the blogger, the 15-year-old girl from the cafe whose name I'd learned was Zoe. And my parents. Both of them. Mom arrived first, wearing the gold bracelet she'd given me, which I'd returned to her at the courthouse exhibition. It's yours, I told her. Keep it as a reminder that you were braver than you knew. She'd cried and put it back on. Now she stood in front of my newest work, a painting titled The Window. It showed a woman inside a house, one hand pressed against the glass, while outside another woman walked into sunlight. Is this us? She whispered. It's everyone who's ever had to choose between someone else's comfort and their own truth. Dad arrived 20 minutes into the event, and I felt my stomach tighten. We'd met for coffee twice since that first conversation, carefully rebuilding something that might eventually be called a relationship. But this was the first time he'd see the full scope of my work. He moved slowly through the gallery, studying each piece. I watched him pause in front of Leaving Home, the painting that had made Mom cry. His fingers traced the air near the canvas, careful not to touch. When he reached the final wall, he stopped. I'd saved the last space for a new piece, one I'd painted specifically for this show. It was called Father and Daughter. Two figures sitting on opposite sides of a door, both leaning against it, close but separated. He stared at it for a full 5 minutes. Then he turned to find me in the crowd, and his eyes were wet. The exhibition raised $2.3 million in sales and pledges. Victoria was ecstatic. Collectors from New York and Los Angeles were requesting private showings. A museum in Chicago wanted to commission a large-scale work for their permanent collection. My life transformed overnight from struggling barista to established artist. I could finally afford a real studio, proper supplies, healthcare. All the things I'd lived without while proving myself. But the moment that mattered most came after the gallery closed, when Dad and I sat on the steps outside, exhausted and overwhelmed. I never apologized properly, he said quietly. For disowning you. For making you homeless. For all the years before that when I didn't see you. You apologized at the cafe. No, I explained myself. That's different from apologizing. So I'm saying it now, clearly, I'm sorry, Lila. I was wrong. About art, about you, about what makes a life meaningful. And I'm sorry it took me so long to realize it. I leaned against his shoulder, something I hadn't done since childhood. I forgive you, Dad. Not because you deserve it yet, but because I deserve peace. He put his arm around me, tentative, like he was afraid I might pull away. Fair enough. We sat there as the city lights flickered on, two people learning how to be family again. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't fixed. But it was a beginning. The next morning, a text woke me, turn on channel 8. I grabbed my remote, heart pounding. The morning news was running a feature about the exhibition. The anchor smiled into the camera. Local artist Lila Rowan's groundbreaking exhibition has raised $2.3 million, with proceeds going toward a new scholarship fund for young women pursuing careers in the arts. The camera cut to footage of the gallery, showing crowds gathered around my paintings. Then it showed me, talking about using art to give voice to the silenced. Rowan, who left home 18 months ago to pursue her passion despite family opposition, has become one of Portland's most celebrated emerging artists, the anchor continued. Her story has inspired thousands of young people to follow their dreams, regardless of obstacles. My phone exploded with texts. Aria, you're famous. Zoe, I showed this to my parents and they're finally letting me apply to art school. Victoria, 3 more museums just called. You're booked through next year. But the message that made me cry came from Dad, watching the news. I'm proud, even if I don't deserve to say it. 3 days later, I stood on a scaffold in front of a massive wall on the east side of downtown. The city had commissioned me for an official mural, the first street artist they'd ever paid for a large-scale public work. I'd chosen to paint my own face this time. Not Echo, not an anonymous woman representing all women. Just me. Lila Rowan, artist, survivor, daughter who'd found her way. In the painting, I held a paintbrush in one hand and scales of justice in the other, showing they could coexist. Behind me, dozens of women emerged from shadow into light, each one representing a different struggle, a different victory. I titled it Defiant Grace, the weight we carry and the wings we earn. Dad arrived as I was finishing the final details. He stood on the ground, looking up at the 40-foot version of his daughter claiming space in the world he tried to keep her from. It's magnificent, he called up. I climbed down the scaffold, paint-covered and exhausted. A small crowd had gathered to watch me work, phones out, documenting the process. Do you finally see it? I asked him. Why I couldn't give this up. He looked at the mural, then at me. I see that you were right. About everything. Art doesn't just matter, it changes things. Changes people. You changed me. That evening, the local news aired footage of the mural unveiling. I watched from my new studio apartment, comfortable and bright, with real furniture and a view of the city I'd claimed as mine. The anchor's voiceover played over shots of the massive painting. Lila Rowan's latest work represents not just artistic achievement, but personal triumph. From disowned daughter to celebrated artist, her journey reminds us that sometimes losing approval is how you find your power. My phone buzzed with another text from Dad. This time, no words. Just a photo. He was standing in his study, and behind him on the wall where he'd always displayed his awards and commendations, he'd hung one of my early sketches. The one of a girl holding a paintbrush like a sword. Underneath, he'd framed a small plaque, Lila Rowan, artist. My daughter. My pride. I stared at that photo for a long time, feeling something warm and whole settle in my chest. Not the desperate need for his approval I'd carried for so long. Just quiet satisfaction that he'd finally learned to see me. Outside my window, the sun set over Portland, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. I picked up my paintbrush and turned to a fresh canvas. There were still stories to tell, still voices to amplify, still walls to paint. But for the first time since leaving home, I wasn't painting to prove anything. I was painting because it was who I was always meant to be. Echo had served her purpose, giving me courage when I needed to hide. But now I could stand in full sunlight as myself. Lila Rowan. Artist. Survivor. Daughter on her own terms. The girl who'd walked out into the rain 18 months ago would barely recognize the woman I'd become. Stronger, surer, no longer waiting for permission to take up space. I dipped my brush in paint and made the first stroke. Whatever came next, I'd face it the same way I'd faced everything else, with grace, defiance, and art that refused to be silenced. Sometimes losing approval is how you find your power. And once you find that power, no one can ever take it away again.